Good evening, folks and friends. My name is Chris Murray, and I'm your host this evening on the Creative Tech Show. Thanks for stopping by. We're going to have an interesting conversation tonight. This was a kind of an unplanned topic. I had been having this topic roll around in my brain for a little bit, and it really just solidified over the past couple days. I had it scheduled actually a little farther down the line in terms of the podcast that I was going to be doing. But I decided, no better time than the present on this one. And there was a lot of timely information that had come across my desk. So I've decided to go ahead and jump in. Tonight's topic on the Creative Tech Show is artists shouldn't work for free. So stop it. About artists getting paid. That's the title of the show. And that's the title I tweeted out. It may be a little over dramatic or a little melodramatic or a little stark, depending on your point of view. So hopefully we're going to have some lively discussion around that. And I know that, the whole premise of the Creative Tech Show is where your inner artist meets your inner geek. And sure, we cover a lot of tech and we cover, software and trends and things like that. And I think that this falls into the category of trends. We're not going to be talking about tools tonight, but we are going to be talking about professionalism. We're going to be talking about how we value our craft and some of the issues that are around that. How do we determine what our value is and the clients that we work with, how do they see us and how do we interact with them when it comes to money? It's, I think, one of the things they never teach kids in design or art school is how to negotiate. I've always said at the different places that I've taught at, and I've taught at a couple, that I think a business class should be part of the art curriculum. And I think that we're not equipping, we may be equipping some great artists out there to make creative decisions about type and space and the rule of thirds and stuff like that, but we're not necessarily equipping them with how to say no, right? And certainly we need to be critical in the critiques, and we are, but we also need to be encouraging in the capability and encouraging that, their art, their craft is actually worth something. I think I've seen a number of places where the critiques are so harsh that in an effort to teach the kids about their craft, they tear them down. And this actually, in my opinion, this is all my opinion, and feel free to challenge it and, challenge me, is my opinion is that if we tear these kids down too much, we inadvertently, the unintended consequence is that we have shattered their concept of self-worth as a professional. And so it makes it hard for them to make a living because they are living in the world of harsh critiques. So what was the inspiration for this podcast tonight? What was it that made me flip a switch and say, you know what, we need to talk about this? And it was an article. There's a little bit of flare up, or a little kerfluffle on the internet this week. I think it was maybe last week actually, by an actor named Wil Wheaton. And I don't know if you all know who Wil Wheaton is. Wil Wheaton is an actor who was on Star Trek, The Next Generation. And he was Wesley Crusher on that show. And he was the he was the son of Dr. Crusher, and, young, kind of foil to some of the antics that are going on there. And then he went off and got educated and went out of off of television for a while. And now he's done some things, I think, on The Big Bang Theory. But on his personal blog last week, he posted a piece about an interaction he had with the Huffington Post. And he had written on his personal blog, a blog, just a stream of consciousness type of entry about, 7 things that he did to reboot his life. And just kind of a life perspective, a life-changing thing on what he did to change his life. And and it got noticed by some people, and it got noticed by some of the people at the Huffington Post. And the people at the Huffington Post was like, "Hey, that's awesome. We'd love to actually. Our readers would probably like that." So the Huffington Post reached out to Mr. Wheaton, and asked him if they could post his piece. The editor approached him, and I'm reading. There's an article. The article is in salon.com. I'm actually let me go ahead and copy and paste this into the chat right now. So I'll go ahead and paste that. And if you're listening to this on a podcast, I will. Let's see. Hopefully that comes in there. If you're listening to this on podcast, I'll go ahead and put it in the show notes as well. So Mr. Wheaton, he gets an inquiry from Huffington Post, and his response was, "Okay, that's cool. So, what will you pay me for that?" And the response from Huffington Post, as quoted in salon.com, says, quote, "Unfortunately, we're unable to financially compensate our bloggers at this time. Most bloggers find value in the unique platform in which our site provides, and we completely understand if that makes blogging with us impossible." So they told him, after he had written his own 3,500 word piece, which is long, right? That's a lot of words. This is really interesting. Our viewers would be very interested in this. Let me have your work. At least I'm asking you for it. And Will said no. Mr. Wheaton said no. And then he thought about it a little bit, and he sent out a couple of tweets, right? And his first tweet was, "Writers and bloggers, if you write something," and this is I'm quoting from Will Wheaton's tweet here. "Writers and bloggers, if you write something that an editor thinks is worth being published, you are worth being paid for it, period." And that really kind of sent off a big firestorm in the community. Maybe firestorm is a little bit of a too strong a word, but definitely caught the attention of several people, including some very smart people, and who we're gonna talk about here tonight. And one of those was Damon Brown from Inc. Inc.com, Inc. magazine, same thing. And he takes a different approach to that, as kind of an opposition to what Will Wheaton is saying. Is like, hey, listen, there's a time and place for everything, and it doesn't. There are times where you're gonna have to probably work for free, right? And he thinks that never working for free is dangerous, and it's different than working for free and doing something for free. That's the delineation that Mr. Brown makes in his article. Doing something for free isn't necessarily the same thing as working for free, and both can have their role, both can have their place in the conversation. Chuck says, "Yeah, typically Huffy BS, right?" Well, they've I don't know. There's one of the people we're going to be quoting tonight who I actually interacted with on Blab. She had some interesting things to say about it. And yeah, maybe they would have edited it, but you never know. So the point is that Mr. Brown brings up some interesting things, and I've seen some of this thing. I've been a creative professional for my entire professional life. I've owned my own company. My own company has failed. I have hired people. I have fired people. I have worked for little or no pay. It is my preference to work for pay. So we really I really wanted to examine this a little bit. And with the unreal nature of how quickly and explosive content is being slung about on the internet, it's amazing, right? And a good example, just a practical example of this happened in the last 3 weeks in Orlando, Florida. In Orlando, Florida, there was a mayoral race, and one of the mayoral candidates, who is a lawyer, running for the mayor of Orlando, he did not win, and I honestly, I'm not going to give him the recognition of presenting his name. But he effectively, this is my opinion, he effectively stole some line artwork of some of the iconic things around Orlando and used it as some of his campaign artwork. And when it came out that he had essentially done this, he tried to back negotiate a deal with the artist. But basically, the argument was, well, the stuff is on the internet, so it's free. Right? Now, that's interesting because the design community was all over this guy for lifting this guy's stuff. And I've seen it before. I've seen it with really professional videographers who have their stuff lifted and stuff passed off as their own. And some photographers have their stuff lifted. And frankly, I've had some of my photography lifted and passed off as well. I don't know. Maybe this is worse. They didn't claim it as their own, but they didn't give me credit for it. So it's like, what's that about? So it's a conundrum, right? Because we have a vast amount of people that we're pumping out into the world that are going to be creative artists. They're going to be creative types, designers, marketing people. And there's this plethora, this orgasmic pool of artwork that is out there that looks great, that people are doing. Will Wheaton is writing a $3,500 piece that a $50 million company wants to promote on their website, but they don't want to pay him for it. What does that say? What message does that send? Right? And it's absolutely ridiculous. Right? So I want to have a serious discussion tonight, a critical discussion. We can have some fun. We can have some comedy, some levity in here. But I've been the line artist. I've been the guy looking for a job, and I've been the employer. And I think that there's a lot of interesting things going on here. So if you're just joining us, I've gotten into the conversation a little bit here. We're talking about artists shouldn't work for free. So stop it. Maybe that's a provocative title for you. Maybe you disagree. Maybe you agree. I'm going to be unlocking the chair here in a few minutes. Businesses, Chuck says, businesses who do not operate with a character ethic will not prevail, regardless of how successful today. You're right about that. You're right about that. And I have some, interesting, I've been there. I've been the small business guy who has failed. And it's not because I didn't have good character ethic. It's because I wasn't a good business person, but that's a different conversation, right? So I want to get into some of the details about some of this. So I kind of recapped that a little bit. And so some of the questions I want to throw out are, is there ever a time when you would want to work for free? And I like Mr. Brown's delineation here of working for free and doing something for free are two completely different things. So I'm going to open up the chair here in a minute, but these are the questions that I'm thinking about. Why work for free? How do we defend against low rates? Right? So as artists, and I admittedly, I am kind of taking a visual artist approach here. Maybe you're a web designer, maybe you're a graphic designer, maybe you're a videographer, maybe you're a camera operator, maybe you're a VFX artist. 2 years ago, after the whole VFX community exploded after Ang Lee won the Oscar and for Life of Pi, and didn't thank one visual effects artist when he was accepting the Oscar. Right now, that's recognition. Some of those people got paid, but my point stands. Right. So I also want to talk about the notion of value exchange. Right. And that's what Damon, Mr. Brown, was alluding to, versus working for free versus doing something for free. There can be a value exchange when money is not transacted. And I want to talk about that a little bit tonight. So I do want to say one more thing. One part of the conversation about Mr. Wheaton's piece and Salon, from his blog, and then Salon and all of these other things, were a question came up that says, isn't writing your own blog essentially putting it out there for free already? It's already out there for free. So I'm just having the common courtesy of asking you for it and promoting it off my site. And I say, no, it's not the same thing. Right? Will Wheaton, he freely admits he's in a place where he doesn't need to have the exposure and reach that the Huffington Post was offering him. Right? He says he doesn't need that. So, yeah, he did it for himself. But if it's not Will Wheaton, if it's Chris Murray, or if it's, someone else, don't you think that if Huffington Post comes to you and says they want to put it on, then if someone comes to you and says they want to put it on, don't you think it's fair to ask for money for that? So, that's a good question. I say no. I say if Will Wheaton went to the Huffington Post, said, "Hey, listen, I just wrote this really big thing, and I think your readers would really be interested in it." Maybe Huffington Post has a little bit more ground to stand on. But they approached him. I don't get to go to the grocery store and say, "I really like that watermelon, but I'm not willing to pay for it, but I still want to eat it." Right? No, I'm sorry. It's not going to happen. So got lots of comments already coming into the room. I'm glad to see this. We need to define working. Yes, Chuck, we do. How do boutiques compete with Walmart? We're gonna talk about that, Joshua. That's a good question. I'll throw that out there. Include writers also. Sure, of course. Yeah, I'm absolutely, any creative endeavor where we're creating something from scratch, I'm happy to include that. We do not compete with Walmart. Better to provide value for those who do care, and there are plenty of people who so care about value, right? And you could make the argument that HuffPo gains more from Mr. Wheaton than he gains from them. Sure, absolutely. Being able to say that you got Will Wheaton as a contributor, yeah, why not? HuffPo started as a blog, but there reports are, I'm not saying this for sure, but I've read, $50 million was the comment. So, okay. So let's go ahead and I'm going to unlock the room and open up the floodgates. If anybody wants to jump in and join this, I have some steering questions, but I'm really interested in what's going on. The question, how do we compete? How do boutiques compete with Walmart? So maybe, are you talking about boutique design studios? Are you talking about boutique, like one-off designers? What's a boutique studio? Welcome, Chuck. How are you doing tonight?
Very fine. Thank you very much.
Welcome to the Creative Tech Show.
Thank you. I'm not a techie, so but I appreciate what obviously brought me in was the headline, and that's the only thing that keeps me attracted to Blab are the wonderful headlines.
Right on.
Pique
Okay.
one's curiosity.
Great. Then I wrote a good headline. I'm going to charge you for that.
Well, that's fine. I'll send you my address via Twitter, and you can send me a bill. The question that Joshua had is something that constantly comes up in the work that I do. I speak in examples because I find it easier. That's why I've had a talk show for so long. But anyway,
paint us a picture.
We had a small drive-in restaurant at one time in a very rural town, and we owned the market. Okay, I mean, the town was so small, and we were the place to go. And everybody was so excited because Burger King was going to open up on the interstate, which was a half a mile away. And all of the naysayers would come in and say, "Oh my God, how are you guys going to stay open?" And I said, "Well, I'll guarantee you one thing, that our business will double the day Burger King opens, and it will stay on that upward spiral as long as they stay in business." And everybody said, "Well, how can that be? You charge more for your hamburgers," and so on. The typical, and you're slower, right? And I said, "Well, one of the reasons why business may not be as good today is people have nothing to compare us to." So I encourage, in fact, I've actually made it easier through the city council to get Burger King to come in because I wanted to increase our business.
Sure.
Because once they went and had a Burger King hamburger, they suddenly realized why we were a little more expensive and why we were a little slower in delivering the final product. Sure. And also why the people were waited on by professionals, even though our staff was high school, but they were trained well. So how do boutiques compete with Walmart? I was going to share in Chico, California, there's a dress shop right next to Sears. The woman who owns it handles only United States-made handmade dresses and clothing with material all from the United States of America. A dress is typically $500 to $700. And Chico, California is not a rich town. You know, it's not San Francisco. It's not the LA market. It's not New York. She's more than busy. And people actually, and middle-aged young ladies, and even those recently out of college, literally save their money till they can go in and buy a fine piece of crafted merchandise. And creative people, artists, painters, writers, people who, my wife woodworks. Somebody says, well, I can buy something similar to that at Pier 1. And she says, well, go and buy it from Pier 1, but it won't be what this is because they can't match it, okay? People appreciate value. And a writer, a painter, there's a gentleman here on Blab who sells his artwork on the streets of New York and does a darn good job of it. He's out there hustling every day. And he demands his price and gets it.
Sure.
And I think the biggest problem that artists may have is they're afraid to ask because they feel they have to have the sale. And once you get it out of your mind that you don't have to have a sale, you can maintain your position.
Sure.
And this is true whether it's art or whether it's an automobile or a horse or, you know, a dairy cow.
And that's kind of what I was alluding to earlier, where, you know,
Yes.
these kids in school, in design schools and art schools, and they're so vicious in these critiques that we're beating the self-confidence out of them. And the point of beating the self-confidence out of them is somehow prove that to get them to learn their craft better. We're not building them up a little bit. We're, you know, and we're certainly not teaching them any business skills in art school. And
well, that's neither are you in they're not teaching them business schools in business school. Who's teaching business schools? People who have never had a business in their lives.
Right.
How can you learn about a business if you're being taught by someone that's never been in business?
Right. Exactly.
That's it. That's my editorial for the night.
Right.
Sorry, Chris.
No, that's all right. That's okay. That's you heard me say I had my own business, you know. So the couple of questions that I had led off with, and you know, how do we you were, one of my questions was, how do we defend against low rates, and your effective answer was, have a better product and embrace the competition because you know you're better than them, right? That's interesting. That's an interesting thing. As visual artists, is there, and for the visual artists that are in the room or anybody here, is there any value in working for free ever? Let me ask it to you this way, you know, and because you had a service business, and graphic design and advertising is essentially a service business. Is there any condition in your small town where you would envision giving your burgers away for free? What if you had a magic wand?
Absolutely.
What is that?
Not only giving burgers away, I made a decent living for many years announcing 30 events a year.
Right.
Announcers make good money for 8-10 hours work because very few people can do it. Very few people can talk continuously for that amount of time. One way that my business grew is that I did a large number of pro bono announcements for 501c3 corporations.
There you go.
Okay. And to be honest with you, announcing is an art form. You are actually directing the show, whether it's a car race, whether it's a horse show, whether it's a livestock event. You know, you're keeping the pace going. And I don't care who's down there in the arena. You're keeping the thing flowing. So it's a developed art form.
Right. So what did you get out of it? If you're helping a 501c3, what did you get out of it? Well,
in 1960, I wrote my definite major purpose in life, and that was to be totally autonomous and help others. And ever since then, for 55 years, I've been allowed to do that because I made it that way.
Right.
I've been autonomous all my life. I've not had to be beholden to anyone except my wife. I'm sorry, she's the boss. But helping others, and whatever I did, I geared my energy to help others. By doing that with sincerity, business absolutely followed. Now, that doesn't mean an artist should sit down and spend 40 hours painting a painting and go give it away. That's not what I'm intimating.
Right.
But if an artist in a local, I had a young man by the name of Bobby Tapia back in 1974 in San Clemente. He had a sidewalk show. Right above my hair is a seascape by Bobby Tapia. He lived in Huntington Beach at the time, and he was selling his artwork in the parking lot for $25 a painting. Do you remember those days? Everybody did it, right?
Sure.
Bobby was a young married gentleman, lived in Huntington Beach in a rented apartment. We've stayed in touch. Today, Bob, for the last 25 years, has had a studio in Sausalito. He would die if I would sell him his painting back that I have right above me.
Right.
Because people in his studio now come in and pay $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $6,000.
Sure.
He doesn't have to dicker with them.
Yep.
That's my price.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
What are they paying for? They're paying for his experience.
There you go. Yep.
But when Bob and I first met and stayed close through those years, those growing years, one thing I did suggest to him is I said, Bob, why don't you donate a small painting to a raffle for the boys club?
Right.
Okay. But guess what? His name's on the painting, the thing's on the back. The guy at the auction or the auctioneer is saying, this is donated by Bobby Tapia, a brilliant young seascape artist, so on and so forth. Okay. So giving things is not bad, but have a plan of action as to why you're giving it, to whom, and what is the benefit is that charity has satisfied a need.
Sure.
And you will be remembered. Now, by the way, you can pick and choose what charities, right?
Right. Sure.
To give you an example, our community of Old Farts, every year we have a bake sale, which we're going to have Saturday. And we usually raise about $800 on a Saturday, and we donate it to the local fire department for them to give Christmas baskets. Last year, we presented them $850. No one, not one person from the Christmas baskets got distributed, but not one person from the fire department sent a thank you letter to our little community organization. You can't believe what a bad taste that left.
Absolutely. No, I know exactly what you mean. Yep.
But we're having the bake sale tomorrow.
Right.
I mean, Saturday.
Sure.
Okay.
Right.
That's giving things away.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, that's right. Rick Wolf asked a question. It's impossible to work totally for free. And
absolutely.
fundamentally, I see what you're saying, because math is math and rent is due and the car payment is due. And I totally agree about that. I want to go back to Mr. Damon's comments from the salon, or excuse me, from the Inc.com article.
Okay.
Mr. Brown, Damon Brown is his name. You would, and I'm not saying I agree with these things, but I just want to throw them out there. You might consider, and remember that, I'm sorry, just one last comment. We talked about not working for free, but doing something for free. And there's a difference. When you can't pay for the experience. Now, that was the argument that Will Wheaton went off on. He's like, it's great exposure, right? When you can't, all right, the second one here, when you can't pay for the exposure. Well, Will Wheaton has a lot of exposure, right? Yeah. And when you can't pay for the experience, like, it's such a great opportunity that you should do it for free. And I have a personal anecdote about that. And when you can't pay to say no, and that's where Will Wheaton is quoted directly by saying, I'm very lucky to not need exposure or reach or anything like that, at least not right now and not this way. I'm also very lucky to be able to walk away from things like this because I believe it's the right thing to do. So he's in the position of leverage there. He has money. He has a job. He doesn't need the job. What about artists who are struggling to pay rent? And Rick clarifies. He says, no, I mean, even a good feeling from philanthropy, a mention, a karma. Yeah, sure. Okay. I'm definitely with you there. And that was kind of where I'm headed. I want to talk a little bit about the exposure thing. And that was one of Will Wheaton's comments there. I had a boutique studio. The original, one of the first questions from Joshua, how do we compete with Walmart? I had a boutique studio back in the early 2000s. We were doing 3D graphics for the web, and we had figured out how to do what are called, today they're called infographics, and they're all over the place. But we had figured out a way to do like video game style information graphics using a 3D game engine in a browser. And this was in 2000. Wow. And the tragedy of the bombing of the USS Cole happened, and there was a lot of news around it. And the news organizations were throwing up all kinds of pictures, and everybody's wanting information. And me and my business partner were like, we could make this in 3D and tell the whole story in a couple of seconds. So we did it on spec. which I want to talk about that in a little bit. We did it on spec, and we sent it up to CNN, and they were all over it. They were all over it. And they put it up there, and at the time, it was their second most downloaded piece of content,
Wow.
second only to the Ken Starr report, which I don't know if that's good or bad. But my point is that, you know, it was easy for us to do. It wasn't a huge investment, and we knew we were going to get a lot of exposure for it. So we did it, and it paid off for us because we then had an ongoing relationship with CNN.com, and we were providing, you know, unfortunately, the events of 2001 happened, 9/11, that sort of thing, and there was a lot of military action, and, you know, we were providing graphics for that. But so there is, I think there is a time and place for that, and but, you know, I was a little far enough down the road to understand that. To understand as a professional that this is a good opportunity, this is a good investment of my time. Part of the conversation I want to have tonight, and again, you know, the topic is artists shouldn't work for free, so stop it. Part of my concern about this is the kids that are coming into our respective industries from schools that are beating their self-confidence out of them in the critique method and the cost of these schools. That's a different blab altogether. You know, and just really beating them up, and they're getting out of school with extremely low self-confidence, and they'll do they have these massive student loans on their backs, and they'll do anything they can to and just full disclosure, I still have student loans for my graduate degree. So, you know, I'm not calling I'm the pot calling the kettle black here, but you know, it worries me that we're not teaching kids the value of their craft, and it worries me that we're not giving them the tools to defend themselves, to negotiate when the client comes back and says, well, you know, you just graduated from school, so your work is crap, right? And that's complete bullshit. Pardon my French there. That's complete crap, because you can be an amazingly talented artist, and just because you're 6 months out of school, you know, you're gonna work for free. No, I don't think so. And I've seen time and time again really talented kids not embrace their own talent because they don't think they're worthy, right? And
Chris, that one point you made, what we're not allowing today in our educational system, which even goes back into the early years of education, is for somebody to have the boldness of unleashing themselves in spite of others. You talked about self-worth, self-esteem. I have observed and monitored some of the educational systems in the higher levels. And when I listen to a professor pontificating in a tenor that actually is tearing down the people in the audience,
right,
so that his ego can be inflated by building them up, because he's going to fill their heads with all of this wonder. I've listened to it. I've observed it. I've written about it, which we won't talk about because it's not under my name. But the point, that's another way to make a living. The artists, people who are creatives, I mean, let's lump them, not artists, creatives, people who create I can't imagine somebody designing a 3D printer or something. You know, it's beyond me. We need for somehow to infuse, maybe person like yourself, this blab could be a tremendous place to let people know that it doesn't matter how old you are. It doesn't matter what your educational background is. If you can produce something creatively, you've got to be real proud of yourself. Now, the gauge of society is, can you sell it? That's what supposedly makes you successful, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
It's easy to sell quality. It's the easiest thing in the world. I mean, trust me, that's my experience for over 55 years. Nothing I've ever dealt with was at the bottom of the pay bottom
Right.
of the price. I mean,
Right.
if you want my product, this is the price. What do you mean there's no show discount? Here's my answer to that.
Yeah.
If I give you a discount at this show, I am being dishonest to the person that just bought one from me last week at full price.
Sure.
So there's no discount here.
Right.
If you don't understand the value, please move on.
Yeah, there's a company out there called totally not really off topic, but just it's an interesting business model. A company, and I'm not a customer. In fact, I heard this information from another blog, so this is an unsolicited whatever for them. Well, maybe I won't mention them, but there's a clothing company, and they right off the bat, there is never a discount, there is never a sale, there is never whatever. This is the price. It's not cheap.
That's honesty. That's honesty.
Not expensive. And they're like, if come to our website, look at our shirts, buy them now or buy them later. We don't really care. Just buy a shirt because the price is $125 today, and it's going to be $125 tomorrow.
That's right.
Right. So I put a question in there, and this is a good segue to the next thing that I wanted to talk about, and I'd really love to hear from some people. We have an open seat here, and if we get enough people, I'll go ahead and close off the question so we can have four windows going. But what about spec work? Doing something and then selling the work for market value. That may be a little too specific. I want to. I was on another blab today with my buddies down in Orlando, and I think one of them's here in the chat. I think John Terry's here, and he and Justice Mitchell have a show. And they're marketing gurus down in Orlando. But this came up today from a viewer of that blab that I was on, a website called No Spec. And I'll go ahead and put the link in the show notes here in a minute. But there's No Spec is basically a consortium of designers and creative professionals that are opposed to the concept of spec work. And there's various information for designers and photographers. And I have to admit, I haven't gone through the entire site, but I found a couple of interesting things here. I want to read a quote from one of the, I guess he's not really a contributor, but he was quoted on No Spec. His name is Mike Dempsey, and he's the past president of the design and advertising design group in the UK, basically a professional organization in the UK for designers and advertising folks. And his quote goes like this. It says, for what it's worth, my recommendations to do any design For what it's worth, my recommendation to any design graduate is to refuse to work for nothing. And while pursuing job prospects, keep active by initiating your own projects to keep the creative muscles sharp. When I first started out, I would visit bookshops and pinpoint badly designed covers, and in my spare time at home, I would redesign them. That act eventually led to a job, a paid job. Don't give up. Believe in yourself. I'm going to save that quote and show it to every Design 101 student that I teach from now on. I think it's interesting that that may have been written, where I don't know what climate that was, the technological climate that was in. I think we're in a place where doing something like what he proposed, but doing it for something that maybe value, we see a lot of people, doing spec work on places like Turbo Squid or Creative Market or Stock Art. I know people that are, hey, Derek, how's it going?
Going pretty good, Chris.
I know people that are making a living, doing spec work on, Shutterstock and Etsy and things like that. So it may or may not completely apply, but I like the notion. The message there is that, my takeaway personally is that the graduate is in control. The artist is in control of the work. Derek, what do you have to say about that?
It's actually funny. I was looking at that website earlier today, so for you to mention it, that's why I kind of hopped in here for a couple minutes. They have a point. There have been projects where I've had nothing going on in the early years, and I saw a website or I saw a piece of artwork and thought I could put a spin on it. It's better to be doing something, even if it's for just practice, than just to be sitting around with a skill that you haven't kept sharp.
Sure.
So like I said, and it's come to be turned into client work after enough of the upfront value. You know, a lot of people use automated websites and get their their logos from a Fiverr or something that they might have heard, or the fact that like Fiverr actually has commercials on TV now. You know, that's someone says, oh, I've got this idea for a website or company, like this commercial just played, it's $5, like let me go check this out. And it's not that they're not willing to invest good money in a project, but if that's what comes across the screen and you see it and you're like, well, this takes care of my need, let's try this. But like I said, I've done projects before for fun. I've done things where it's just fan artwork, and then people see it and go, well, you're pretty creative, let me bring you in on my project. Let's see if you can go in a direction that's different from what we have right now. And it's so on that point, when I heard that, I'm like, it's it's something you can do. Like, as far as it seems a bit dated if he's talking about a book cover.
Yeah.
But it's just a way of I still do it. Like, I have my clients, and when I've got nothing doing, I have Photoshop open and I'm working on things. I mean, I'm sure you have back projects that you're working on, Chris, that are more just let me see if I can mess around and do this kind of thing.
I have a million unfinished personal projects.
And that's how that keeps you, focus on what you do when it comes to a project, a paid project,
right.
And it's, hey, I picked up this quicker tip to do this quicker. So now let's apply it to the stuff that is going to pay the rent, so to speak.
Right. Yep, exactly.
Chris, on that line, I think of my wife, and she obviously is not in the caliber that Derek and the people that you guys hang with. She does woodworking, since we had to leave the animal industry, and she's out there every day, and she does an awful lot of what we call, what's the word? People ask her to make this, consignment work, not consignment work. What is it called?
Commission.
Commission, yeah. But that takes a part of her day, and she's always creating new ideas, which we then show the public. We find it much better to show the public in person than we do on the internet, because the internet does not show my wife's quality and so on.
Sure.
And so somebody said, well, why do you do? I mean, we've got a whole wall of the garage full of her work. And this is kind of interesting. Somebody asked her one day, well, you've got an awful lot of material and time invested in that. Why do you keep doing it? Why don't you just do commission work? And she says, because I enjoy doing this.
Sure.
I mean, it's really funny. That's her statement. She enjoys doing it. That makes her feel good, which is interesting because it allows her to do her commission work better, because she feels very good about her work personally.
Right.
Again, that might be sounding deep, but spec work, has anybody ever built a spec house? Have you ever bought a lot and built a house, and how do you know you're going to sell it?
Well,
and some people didn't. Some people didn't.
Well, and that's true. I mean, they could lose their shirt on that, I guess. It's spec work is interesting because I see both sides of that. I see people that are doing really good work and they're putting it on places like Shutterstock and whatever. And I admit that I've put some of my photos on like Redbubble and places like that. And if someone buys it, great. If someone doesn't buy it, I'm not trying to make my living off of that.
Right.
But so I'd be interested in hear from someone in the room about spec work. If anybody's actually done spec work, Carl's put up a video. I'll check that out afterwards. I don't know if I want to have time to watch a YouTube video right now, but I definitely want to see it. I definitely love to hear those from people in the chat, about spec work. And I want to revisit this notion of value exchange a little bit. Doing something, working for free versus doing something for free. What are the things that are valuable to you? What type of things would you do? Or excuse me, let me rephrase that. What type of work, what would you like in return for something you would do for no money? what are the types of things that you would want in return? Do you want exposure? Is exposure the thing that is driving that? Is are you designing will work for food type of deal? Hey, John.
How you doing, Chris?
Great. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, sir. How's the audio?
That sounds awesome, dude.
Excellent.
Awesome.
Yeah. How's life down in Orlando?
Life is good, although I think I need to go downstairs and get a bourbon and then come back up. But there we go. So no, the question is, all right, now I'm really I'm so jealous, man. I came up to the office ill prepared. The question is, what would you do in return for doing free work for somebody, right?
Yeah, or what's worth doing something for free?
What's worth doing? Well,
yeah.
So for me, as a writer, I'm not really a graphics guy. I mean, I can goof around with Photoshop and Illustrator a little bit, and I can kind of muddle my way through things. However, so for me, Justice is a great example. He and I, for years, have had an arrangement where I will edit things for him. I will write things for him in trade out for him doing logos for me and website design. And it's just a real good reciprocal arrangement. Somebody who's got a different skill set than I do.
Right. Okay, that's cool. And little inside joke there. You editing Justice Mitchell?
It's a lot of work.
At least you're not editing him real time. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Good. Right. I got you. Right.
At least, yeah. But okay. Yeah. But okay. And Rick says that's not free, right? There's a cost, right? The cost to you is your time and talent.
Great point. Sure.
In exchange for his time, and that's okay. And that's that's the notion of the value exchange. What do you think about a company like the Huffington Post, which, according to these news articles that I was referencing this evening, is worth in excess of $50 million, going to a guy like Will Wheaton, who maybe not an A-League actor, but certainly not an unknown,
right,
and saying, sorry if that doesn't work out for you. I mean,
well, I don't get it. It doesn't make sense. But also at the same time, I would like to know, what do their staff writers make? Yeah, I mean, do they rely purely on outside writers? Do they have staff writers? I guess they have staff writers,
right?
And are they making a living wage?
Right. Yeah, it's a good point. And Carl brings up a really excellent point here. He says, "I've done it, but the company I work for locks in future work by telling the client, if you take the real job somewhere else, the client loses all discount." Yeah, I mean that's negotiation is probably another show that I want to have. I do that. I mean, I offer discounts for timely payment. I offer discounts for all kinds of things, right? I'm interested in having a relationship. I don't want to price myself out of the market. And if it's a really, I don't tell this to the client, but if it's a really fun looking project and the client's not a pain in the ass, I might consider doing it for free, but I wouldn't. It's right. So there's all kinds of things in there. And the worse yet, news services are turning to computer written articles. Carl, good point. And John, I know you have something to say about that.
Well, for one thing, it shows. I mean, you can pretty much tell when it's a computer generated article, and I'm sure those algorithms will get better and better. But for right now, at least, the human touch is not there. I mean, I can tell. I assume other people can tell as well.
Right. What other parts of the value exchange are there? Do you who initiates the value exchange? Is it the person who has the greater need, or is it the person who has the greater access of talent? Who has leverage in the value exchange relationship?
I mean, I would have to assume that the person with the talent has the leverage. It sure feels that way. Well, this might be a little bit of a tangent, but I can tell you what happened to me recently. I was approached a few months ago by a commercial realtor here in Orlando. And this person, I met with him. He's got a really successful business. He's doing well. I learned about some projects he's working on, some high profile projects. And the guy clearly he's got cash flow and he's making a great living. Having said all that, he had an idea for a new project he wanted to launch and a website he wanted to build. and he was looking for a copywriter, and I was recommended, and we met and we had drinks, and I got the old, I tell you what, I will be happy to give you a piece of the action on the back end. Right? This is going to be huge. I guarantee you, this is going to be huge. And we had a couple conversations, and, you know, like you, I've had this is going to be huge conversation many times. And I walked.
Absolutely.
So I was the guy with the talent, and he needed my help, and I ended up walking because I wasn't into it.
Right. And there's this infamous, I don't know if it's real or if it's not, but I remember a couple of years ago that email that was going around by the graphic designer who was having this comical back and forth.
Right.
You know, it's like Facebook, but
yeah.
and all he's asking for is a pie chart.
Yeah.
Right. And let me see. I don't know if it'll let me put it in here because it's not a straight URL, but if you guys want a good laugh, copy and paste this and read it later. It's I have it bookmarked for this very type of occasion. But it's, you know, the guy asks, oh, it's all the back end. You know, you do something good for me now, there's more work coming. And whenever I get that, I'm like, oh, great. What's the work?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, we'll have to see how this project goes. Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you just said there was more work. But, you know,
it's going to be there
because I want all the
down
work,
the road.
right? So, yeah, I want all the work. So if you have more work, we can discuss all the work. But if we're not discussing all the work, then we're only discussing this work. You know, and that really definitely, you know, irritates me there. One of the questions I had early on, I don't know if you saw the show intro or not, but how do we defend? Forget the notion of working for free or value exchange for a second, and I'd love to hear it. We have 2 open seats available, so if there's anybody that's in the audience that'd like to join in on this, the question that I'd like to pose to you, John, and other people in the room is: how do we defend against low rates? And it's easy. It's an easier argument with people with experience like you and I, and maybe other people in the room. But how do we teach kids, recent graduates, how do we defend against low rates? And you know, I'm with you on the experience thing and all that other stuff, but I'd love to hear some strategies from anybody in the room. And John, I'll throw it to you, put you on the spot, and maybe someone else will join in.
That's a great question. And so I guess what you're talking about is how can we coach younger people? I mean, is that kind of where you're going with this? Or
I'm totally open, dude. I don't have,
all right,
you know,
so let's talk about this for a moment. And by the way, somebody mentioned earlier, I saw a comment over here that I had too much gain. So I dialed my input back a little bit. Hopefully that helped.
Okay.
This is going to go in a little bit of a different direction for a moment, but I was thinking about this earlier today because I was at a client's office today, and there are 3 people on their staff, young women who are 22, 23, fresh out of college. And we were having a conversation similar to this. And some of them are doing some freelance work, and they were concerned about the lowball rates that people were offering them. In the same conversation, one of them was talking about how she's taking a trip to Spain next year, and she wants to work on her Spanish, and she used BitTorrent to download a language teaching program. And I thought, well, this is really interesting that these young people, these kids, for lack of a better term, they're willing to pirate software, and they're willing to pirate music and movies and devalue somebody else's work.
That is an excellent point.
And
I got to remember,
right?
I absolutely remember that when they're, you know, when I'm having the business conversation, I'm adding that to my lectures, because it's like, so if you want to get paid going rate, stop stealing shit.
Yeah. And I use the argument I always use, you know, like if you were at an intersection and Steven Spielberg was at the intersection in his convertible and a Blu-ray of his new movie was on the seat, would you just reach in and grab it and walk away? Right. And their response was, well, he's got enough money already. Okay, great.
Sense of entitlement.
I know. So I don't think I really answered your question, but I guess what I'm trying to say is I think there's a deeper problem. There's a root issue there as well.
Right. So the question is, for those of you that I saw a couple people just join the room. Hi, Robert. Hey, Richard. Glad you guys are here. Lucy, you want to jump in? You want to jump in and help us unravel this
Come
onion?
on, Lucy. We'd love to have you in here.
Yeah. How do we? Not really. All right. No problem.
It's all good.
Feel free for someone else, Carl, or if anybody else wants to jump in, or Russ. Feel free to jump into the conversation here. The question we're trying to dissect is how to defend against low rates. The premise of the show that we started off with was artists shouldn't work for free, so stop it. But we've promptly added a couple of asterisks to that comment because maybe it's not working for free, but doing something for free in some kind of value exchange. So how do we defend against low rates? What do you tell a recent graduate, either from bachelor's degree or maybe even a graduate degree? How do you tell them to stop charging $15 an hour?
So stand their ground is one thing, right? Like just don't give into the lower offer. And you got to be willing. I think I commented about this earlier. You have to be willing to walk away. You have to be willing to just say, no, I won't take $15 an hour or whatever it is. And that's not always easy when you're 22, 23 years old and you've got a car payment to make.
Yeah. One of the things I try to tell them is don't take the money just to pay the rent.
Yeah.
And unfortunately that ends up being their hourly rate. It's like, okay, well, my rent is this much and I need to work. This is how many hours I have to work, and they do that. Oh, Lucy's coming in. Good. All right. Did we guilt you into it,
Apparently.
Lucy? She's coming in. They have to build. Yeah, Lucy's. They have to build a portfolio.
They do.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. All right. So when oh, Lucy, we lost you.
And that is a catch-22.
Okay, so actually, I do want to talk about that. So one of the things about defending against low rates, and this answer just came to me because of Lucy's comment. When I was in school, in between stops at various beverage establishments, because we never did that in college, right?
Right,
John. You were probably just strictly milk and cookies for you. Right?
Angel. I was an angel.
Right.
In bed by 10.
So what I did in college, I did 3 internships before I graduated college. I went to a college that required one, which I thought was unusual, that they required any. And I was a marketing communications. I was a communications major with a minor in studio art. And the communications department only required 1 internship. I did 3. My first internship was my sophomore year in college in downtown Cleveland at the American Red Cross. And they are always looking for talented, or frankly, they'll take anybody they can get. They need, I was working in their PR department and I was doing PR communications at the American Red Cross all summer. It's a great job. I got to do a lot of things. I got to do some videography. I got to, a lot of unexpected stuff. My second internship was at Liggett Stash Hour Advertising in Cleveland. That was a paid internship. It was a who you know kind of thing. I'll freely admit that. But, Liggett Stash Hour was a top 100 agency back then. Got to, as a college junior, got to work for, Sears and AT&T and whatever the regional stuff was. I got to do that. And then my last internship was with a county government agency, government communications, working for the chief information officer for Polk County in Florida. So internships are a solid defense against low rates.
And she keeps trying.
Lucy keeps trying.
It's interesting too. You mentioned that your first internship where you began to build that portfolio clearly was with the Red Cross. And earlier Chuck mentioned something I was going to mention, which is nonprofits are a great way to kind of build that portfolio and develop your chops.
Yeah. And I think that if you're going to successfully, if you have, and to anybody that's in the room, hey, there she is.
Hi. Hi, sorry
Greetings,
about
Lucy.
That.
No need to apologize. It was probably John's fault.
No, it was the Manicam and the Chrome issue that I've been having issues with, and I figured it out how to fix that
Oh, did you watch my minicam tutorial?
I did, and then so anyways, I don't want to interrupt the conversation and flow.
No problem. But it was Lucy's comment that the conversation we're having right now is how to defend against low rates for new kids out of school. And if anybody in the room listening or on the podcast later, because this is going to be repurposed, if any of you have sway over a student in college or in graduate school, please tell them to go get an internship, because these kids that are coming out and working for nothing or free, one, they're not helping themselves, and two, they're not helping us as professionals. But Lucy, what did you have to say tonight?
I guess I'll play a little bit of a devil's advocate just to spice things up again, because I am, I can take something about 85%, but then I kind of always do need a creative, a designer to pull it through to the professional level. I think everything is changing, right? Every industry is seeing its own challenges of having to redefine them, media, creative, with all the crowdsourcing options that small business entrepreneurs have these days.
Mm-hmm.
It's just tough to command and preserve premium rates as they used to be commanded 5, 8, 10 years ago. All the sources that are available to everybody in the startup world, in the entrepreneurial world, in the small business world. I mean, it just makes things tough. So I don't think that there's a magic answer to being able to preserve high premium rates for creatives. I just think you just got to keep going, getting it. With the younger kids, and I say younger kids, I've taken about 5 classes through a college internship program, over the course of the last 3 years. They were groups about 6 to 7. And I think that that's a great testing ground to, play with free, projects and try and build portfolio. But I do still think that you said, Chris, earlier, this entitlement issue, sometimes that you kind of sort of see with the younger millennials. You kind of define millennials, 20,
but it's really a broad spectrum.
Yeah. It is broad, but some of these 22, 24-year-olds that are coming out of college and living, they live the world of the unicorn startup, right? Yeah. Or they think that they're going to deserve a spot at 150, 250, and if you're not making that straight out of college, you're shit. Right. I mean, I shouldn't say that.
And I'm laughing because I know this person. I just talked to
I know several of them. Right.
And by the way, they want to be done at 5 o'clock every day too.
Right.
No. Right. And work balance, and they don't have a husband, wife, kids. Anything at all. So I'm just. Sorry, that's supposed to go off. My TV came on. So I'm just jumping in. I think that it's going to be really, really challenging for truly creative people, as broad a spectrum that is, to maintain high premiums when you have so many options on the table that weren't simply there 3-5 years ago.
You're right. And I alluded to the fact of artists doing spec work on places like Shutterstock and Etsy and all of these, the creative market. I mean, there's a billion different places. So these transactional websites, we call them microtransactions, or whatever you want to call them. These transactional websites kind of become the broker, right? You have a series of this whole category of consumers of creative that don't want to hire an agency. They don't want to go out and endeavor to find a talented artist to bring on staff temporarily or contract with. And then we've trained these people to think that everything on the internet is free. Right. And so, they have a little bit of money. They don't want to be a complete, ass about that kind of thing. So they'll go to a place and buy a piece of stock art or buy clip art. Right. And
I've done it. I'm in the process of doing
it. And I admit I've done it too.
Right. I mean, so it's tough. I mean, I think I was on a podcast with you, or a blab, I should call it. Right? You guys look so professional with your microphones there. I think I was with
it's all an illusion.
With you, Chris. It was one of my first blabs, and you. It was a group, and there was a guy on it, and he said we should just do something all together. It'd be cool to kind of just lean in, all as creatives, and do something together, which is a little counter to this conversation in this topic. Although if the creatives got to get 100% of the upside of that collaborative project, I guess that would be the differentiator, right? As opposed to doing work for free for no upside. You both kind of dogged the whole person that I probably have done before,
Right.
Oh, there's upside in it, percentage of back end. And I was like,
I
oh.
mean,
okay, so
from your perspective, you have to do that. I get it.
No, that's right. That's what I'm saying. So I'm bringing a small business entrepreneur, cash preserving,
Yes.
perspective.
And I need to be I need to be fully transparent here. I had a studio, and I was the guy that was hiring college students, but I was paying them, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was not paying them a lot of money, but it was enough for them to get their beer money and do their stuff. And there were a couple of things that helped me secure that lower rate. I was very transparent with them. One, I told them when the contracts that they were working on for me, they saw the contract, right? So they knew that. And I told them, I said, I got the roof over the heads. I have the computers. I have the software. This is my expense. This is your cut. Two, there's a definite time frame for the project. So there will be an end time, and you can move on at any time. I'm not locking you into a commitment. You can go. I want you here, but only if it works for you. And three, I didn't sell it as there's more work coming. I said, if it takes off, because we were doing some game work, I said, if it takes off, you're going to be the person that goes with me, and I'm going to put that in writing. And whatever deal comes from that, you're going to get a percentage. And here it is in writing. However, there is no guarantee. And
you just nailed my point that I was also trying to make in that earlier blab, because I did say it's all in the upfront agreement, right?
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
If a creative does come into a project, co-owning the upside, right? And there is no agreement of proprietary work, right? So if things are co-developed, for there to be a claim on that work towards the end and to hold that asset hostage, as opposed to saying, oh, well, we didn't monetize, let bygones be bygones. And that's kind of where I was coming from when I was making that earlier comment.
And the other thing is I also told them that any work that they did for me, even though I owned the copyrights on it, they had complete and total rights to use it in their portfolio. There was no restrictions on it whatsoever. But not for the creative to hold rights against the co-developer, right? Exactly.
Or the original content provider or the developer, which is kind of what I was experiencing in my experience. That's why I was like,
right.
I've 3 different times I've kind of gotten into that battle.
Right. So you were being held hostage?
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, I would take my product that was about 90% developed, right? I provided the stock work. I said, put this here, this there, this here. Didn't even ask for any copyright, told them exactly what to write. So there's zero dependency on that type of work. And so it got pulled together, that 5 to 8% over the end line.
Over the finish line, right?
Exactly. And then, so that event did not happen, but we pushed it to the next year. So all I was asking for were the files so that we could just make one change, 2015 to 2016. That's it.
Right.
And it was no, I put X number of hours into this and it didn't monetize, and I want X dollars to release the files. And I said, what are you talking about?
Yeah.
And that's part of my, the non-creative business side of the house coming to the table was just that perspective. And I can totally understand but the entrepreneurs and developers and business people put in just as much work.
Right.
It's not like we don't put work in. I don't expect to get paid if it doesn't monetize. So I thought that was the understanding from the get-go, which it was.
Right.
That's why I was surprised at that change in position.
And
my babies are being hostage. I'm like, what are you talking about?
Right.
And I'll have to, I'm going to make a note of this after the show. I'm going to do another blab on contracts and negotiation. And I'm not a lawyer.
You totally should.
But I've been in the business a while. I had a a derived contract. I had a couple of sources for where I got the material, and we did a project for Disney. We did it with Chaz. Remember Charles Stovall?
Oh yeah, yeah.
My studio did some work for Charles. It
Right.
was It was a 3-page contract. It got through Disney legal in 4 days. Right?
Wow.
Yeah. Full and like no changes. Seriously. And so we'll have to talk about that on another blog. But my point back to Lucy's thing is, I do all of my work with rights contingent on payment. And there are a lot of people out there, like, there's a group called the Graphic Artists Guild of New York, and they put out a Graphic Artists Guild handbook every year, and it's kind of the Bible for illustrators and designers. I don't know if Mr. Wonderful is still on the blog or still on the podcast tonight, but he would probably know about it. But they have a lot of sample contracts in there and sample agreements, but they're all don't do anything work for hire, don't do anything, and I think maybe that's where I'm willing to kind of bend the rules a little bit or bend the expectations, as long as people can get paid for their work. When you're, the George Lucases and Steven Spielbergs or J.J. Abrams or, even the up and coming guys, if you are strong enough to have your own, command your own licensing and stuff like that. But maybe that's another defense for defending against a low rate is, go ahead and do work for hire as long as you know what you're getting into.
Mm-hmm.
And go ahead and do work for hire, but don't be dumb about it, right? Don't give away the rights, give away the work, and not get paid. If you're going to do work for hire,
is on the creative, right, to set that in stone. Absolutely. Before the work is actually done.
And that's
you can't do it ex post facto.
Oh, no.
Exactly.
No way.
No, yeah,
right?
Yeah,
which is kind of what I feel the experience was, which is why I'm frustrated. I wish I knew Adobe Photoshop. I wish I knew those programs as well as I need to.
Sure.
But once they go into that type of program, I feel like, they're layer, and they're locked. And so you can't go make one single change to it. And then you're at,
and I tell the advice that I give the kids that I teach in school and stuff like that, or, whenever I'm speaking to kids about that, I'm like, it's okay to do work for hire, but you have to know what you're getting into, and you have to preserve your rights up front.
Mm-hmm.
And Carl says, never sign anything that you don't have something for the opposite party to sign. True. You got to have the signatures on both sides, sides of the fence there. So
I don't want to take up the seat too long.
No, your contributions are
no makeup. I was just going to come in and listen, but I did actually want to play devil's advocate in a room probably full of creatives.
I'm glad you did.
Kind of giving the small business entrepreneur cash, preserving side of the house.
Sure.
I mean, I've launched 2 magazines over the last decade. And the difference between available platforms within the last decade has been astounding. I mean, if you really think about what it took to build a website and go and launch, you were easily in the 5-figure, right? Easily
sure.
5-figure. Even 5 years ago, when I launched my second magazine, you were still kind of in the low end of 5-figure to get a decent website up Now, $30 and $50 and $20 a month, and you're good to go in terms of getting live into an e-commerce platform. And then really the creative then kind of gets down to logo and branding, which then is along the whole spectrum of where do you invest in the creative aspect of it, right?
Yeah.
So that's just my small business perspective. I will fade into the night of.
Thank you. And by the way, I come from the print world. That's where I started.
Okay,
and I worked for a Tribune company for many years.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I tell the students that I work with, I said, if you want to be a writer, you want to be a photographer, you want to do anything in newscasting, you better be able to deliver all media levels and types. You better be multi-journalistic, and you better be a single source producer of all asset classes, because that's what's going to be required of you to survive.
I think that's the most I think that is the most professional sounding term I've ever heard on Blab. Can you say it? The single source produce? What was that?
A single source media producer that is able to produce all levels of media deliverables.
Shut up and take my money. What do you mean?
Yeah.
Great.
Anyway,
no, that's great. That's great.
But it would, I think, minimize a lot of the challenges out there. And where do you preserve rate? Well, you have to be a consultant that can produce anything that the client wants and needs of you, which is PR, right? It's copy, right? It is video assets. I mean, Chris, your video for the Manicam training was awesome. I mean, really, that's in the last year is really where the video asset is now becoming. If you don't have a 10-second, 30-second, and 3-minute video asset on your company, you're behind the times, right? It's almost like you can't even be considered real unless you do have those assets. And so you either better figure it out really quickly or hire somebody. So right? So that's why I'm trying to figure this stuff out.
Let me ask before you jump, because you have some really interesting insights here. What's next? What is over the horizon that we're not seeing here? What are the trends here?
I think, and I can't remember who said it. There was someone in the comments that posted, it's all becoming computer generated. When you look at the aggregation of articles that can be tagged per subject type. I've had a business plan where I've been trying to aggregate over 200 sources and just trying to find funding for it over the last 2 years. And now, boom, Rebel Mouse is up by, are you guys familiar with Rebel Mouse?
No, I'm not. Educate me.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I have been trying to create a database of public health access points for about the last 2 years. I've wanted to be the Huffington Post of the youth sports and family space, right?
Right.
Well, Huffington Post, the chief technology officer, who built Huffington Post's platform, has a product called Rebel Mouse. And so it basically surfs and pulls all of the relative. It's kind of like a Flipboard, right? When you can create your custom Flipboard based on all of your preferred categories. I know you guys are familiar with Flipboard.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes.
Yeah. So Rebel Mouse is kind of basically that automated aggregation site. I mean, their price point is high. They're about $100,000 platform, but it is what Sports Illustrated and what the big media companies are doing. Because, and again, here's a challenge for journalists. Here's a challenge for creatives. Where do you, National Geographic, right? Did you guys see that?
Yes.
Rupert Murdoch, right?
That is yeah.
All of their staff gone. Did you, it was only a year ago where Sports Illustrated, fired all of their photographers, right? I've been burned by a photographer before using a photo that I thought I had rights to from my first magazine, and in the hurries of you're in print, right? You're trying to go to press, and I threw a photo in there, and dang it, didn't read the fine print, didn't realize that I didn't have rights to use that photo in a publication other than the one that it was contracted out for. So, I mean, the automation of data and the aggregation is really going to be challenging, I think, for people in media. I mean, now the creatives are always going to have that personal touch, right? But if you're a journalist, that's going to be tough.
Yeah. Jeffrey, welcome to the show.
Thank you. That's my 2 cents.
Thanks, Lucy.
I'll see you guys later.
Lucy.
Chris, I'll pop in and I'll follow you, John. Thanks, you guys.
Sounds good.
Yeah,
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Jeffrey, how are you?
Are you guys getting an echo?
A little bit.
I was, but now I'm not.
Yeah, I don't know. I heard it for a split second myself as well. So
it was Lucy. She's not in the room. Just blame her.
Wow, it's really cool conversation tonight, guys. I was working in the background, and I just I'm actually rearranging my room and shook the drywall off I was working on and said I got to get in on this. I think it's a really great topic.
Cool. Wait, hold on. Wait, I want to hear what you thought, but you're rearranging. This is what I just heard. You're rearranging the room. So you shook off the drywall. So you're rearranging the room, like you're actually moving the walls of the room?
Stuff around. Yeah, I've got a home studio, and I've got basically a little radio room, and then I've got an area out here where I've got a green screen and stuff. And so basically I'm trying to move some things around, and had been running wires through the walls and things. I hadn't gotten around to it for the last year, and I thought I probably should start working on it before it gets busy for me. I'm going to be in New York next week working. I figured now's the time to try to do it. But
so what's on your mind, Jeff?
Yeah, I think there was a question earlier about, you know, how do you defend against low rates? And I think the one thing that I keep coming back to time and time again, especially with young professionals working in the creative field, is that their art is attached to their heart. And when you look at getting paid as being it's your validity, that I think many times is where people can get ripped off or certainly lowballed, because it feels great to feel like somebody respects what you do and they like what you do and those kind of things. And you know, I tend to think the art world, the old starving artist thing is, you know, a saying for a reason. You know, that the art, you know, community and the creative usually, you know, there's somebody who they're not about the numbers, they're about the expression. And I think that that as a core part of it really plays into it.
Yeah, you know, that's another good point, because it one of the hard lessons I learned was don't get married to your artwork.
Right.
Yeah. You know, and I learned that the hard way because I was working in an animation firm, and we had just done this animation for this huge architectural firm. It was one of the largest architectural firms in the world, and they hated it. We went to the client meeting, and it was like you'd thought that we had like dissected a cat on the conference table right there. It was that bad. And then I had the distinct, and I'm the junior. I was the junior guy on the team at this time. I had the distinct misfortune of going to the elevator to leave with my tail between my legs, and the executive, the design director, comes around the corner who just ripped us apart and gets in the elevator with me. And they're like on the 40th floor.
It's a long ride.
That was a long ass ride. It was in that elevator ride that I learned to stop being married to my work.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a manager once that would put these boundaries on me called no tweaks for 2 weeks, because the work was never quite done, even though everybody kind of loved it. I was like, nah, I want to fix this. And yeah, I mean, I get it. But I think you know, it used to be 10 years ago that a company or an organization would say, hey, we really want to stand out from the crowd with video or audio, doing radio, whatever it might be. Who's the best in the area, or who's the best within a reasonable range we can afford? And then they would get the reels, they would evaluate them, that kind of thing, and then they would pick somebody. We've kind of evolved to this point, in my opinion, of people saying, hey, you know what, throw $500 on Craigslist and let's see who's stupid enough. Maybe it's the wrong way to say it, but you know, who's gullible enough to kind of bite on it, or who needs the work so much they're willing to give more of what they really should be giving in some ways. You know, I feel like in some ways that the people are being taken advantage of pretty deeply on Craigslist and things like that.
And so how are you combating that?
I don't take work on Craigslist. You know, I'm quick background. I'm 30 years in digital media. Just wrapped up 5 years producing a TV show out of Washington, D.C., and worked in online media for 10, 12 years in between. And so I feel like I've got enough understanding of my own value that I have no problem making it clear there's a certain fee that I want for the kind of work I think I can deliver. And to be honest with you, if somebody doesn't see the difference in that, it doesn't mean that they're wrong and I'm right. It means that we're not a fit.
You're not a good fit. Right.
And you know, but I
great point.
People, you know, most of my work comes word of mouth. But I just feel like that the biggest hindrance to the kind of work that we all try to enjoy at a certain rate are sites like Fiverr.com now, where you're competing with people that will basically do work that you would normally pay $200 with or $200 for. They would do what is it, $5 or $10, $15, you know, but it's part of the world we're in. And I think there's a place for embracing it, but you definitely have to be strategic on how you're going to sell yourself in a world that we're in now. You're not competing against the guy 2 blocks down next to the 7-Eleven, you know, it's you're competing against everybody.
It's global for sure.
Yeah.
Right. Hold on, I'm catching up with some comments here.
That's all good. And actually, Chris,
I'm sorry.
I need to hop off. I got to hop off. Unfortunately, I've got some writing to do. So
right.
I got to get to work.
Well, go get some bourbon and make that writing good.
I think that'll help. Yeah. All right, guys. Talk to you later.
All right. Thanks, John. So again, we're here with the Creative Tech Show, sitting in with Jeff Fitzgerald. You know, you and the guy that was just on, John Terry, you guys probably know a lot of the same people, because the what you described sounds a lot like John's background. So, but we're talking about artists shouldn't work for free, so stop it. Do you work for free? Do you not work for free? Is there any condition under which working or doing something for free is a good thing? Some of the questions we've been discussing tonight are how to defend against low rates, the notion of value exchange, and the concept of, and I don't have a phrase for this, so Jeff, if you've got one, feel free to chime in. But earlier in the conversation, we were talking about Will Wheaton's post and his criticism of Huffington Post for not paying for his blog. The rationale being, if you're writing your own blog and putting it out there for free, isn't that already the same thing? Aren't you doing it for free? So why should Huffington Post have to pay for it? So, and of course, we were just talking about spec work. So if anybody in the room, Jeff, do you have any comments or thoughts about the notion of, if something is already out there for free, don't we just have to ask you politely to use it? Since you've already put it out there, why should I have to pay you?
Well, I have definitive opinions on that. I think that Will's right. I think that, yes, if you put something out for free, there's a community that you're giving it to spread your words, spread your message, whatever you want to do, build your brand, however you want to define it. But when a for-profit company takes that as a value asset and puts it in their bucket to build their brand value, I think there's a reasonable expectation that you should have a conversation about it. Now, what does that mean? Does it mean they pay in terms of money, or do they pay in terms of, giving you fame, and so many words for it, promoting what you're doing? I don't know what that, where that may or may not come down. But I definitely believe that if you are creating value, I guess it would be the same thing. Like if, I do a lot of tweeting, but very few of them are tweets that I actually write myself, because I really feel like it's just replicating the same thing that everybody else is doing. I love technology, love digital media, and I like sharing kind of a curated list of content. But, I always retweet, so everybody gets their own individual credit on that. But what would happen if I was going to do a video show like we're doing right now, and it's basically the top stories of the day, and I'm rolling through all these really great stories about the Apple iWatch now being $50 off when you buy an iPhone 6, or we're talking about Google, but I'm not giving any credit to any of the sources where the stories came from, or it's kind of hidden in the background. And somewhere in there, I think there's a threshold changeover where you're actually usurping some of the value that somebody probably worked very hard to create. So, it's one of those things where, the internet has created a free-for-all in so many different areas. I could be very wrong on that, but I tend to think that, a big company, if they're taking something and using it to build their brand with, and it's very obvious, I think there's probably room for a conversation. So, that's my opinion.
My day job is I'm a technical evangelist for a major software company.
Cool.
And it's a graphic design, it's a 3D animation software company.
Oh, sweet.
And I'm in marketing. I'm in technical marketing. And so one of my roles is to figure out ways to tell our stories as much as we can with customer work, right? Now, we're trying to sell software. We're not necessarily trying to sell our customers' artwork. But we're certainly big enough that, we're a big company. We're a Fortune 500 company. But we have a standing rule that unless we do hire artists to do things for us that we own. But if our customer is doing work, we ask them permission to show their work. And if they say no, we of course don't use it. But if they say yes, we put their name all over it, and people see it and all that other stuff, because that's the best that we can do with our marketing budget. Otherwise we'd be right. Supplying, we'd be paying all of our own customers, so,
yeah, but I kind of feel like that's a little different than the HuffPost story. Yeah. Because artists, that is a method of bringing out the art and showing the world through, there's a lot of loyalty, whether, if it's 3D Studio or Maya or Cinema 4D, whatever it might be, the art that's created, people who are artists love to show their work. And it's kind of cool. It's like when, when you're on Blab and one of the Blab team gets on and says, hey, you guys are doing a good job. Everybody likes kind of a pat on the back that way. I think it's a little different in that setting, because you're not actually trying to I think, take from somebody.
Right.
The content, in terms of news and opinion and things, I don't know. Maybe it is a little different.
Yeah, for sure. So if you're just joining us, I know we've had some other people just come in the room. We're talking about artists shouldn't work for free, so stop it. Some of the questions we've been dealing with was why work for free or how to defend against low rates. We've currently been dissecting the notion of putting something out there on your own doesn't necessarily make it free for the rest of the world to leverage. Maybe that's a good way to good way to say it. Did you hear any of the earlier conversation about working for free or doing something for free and the subtle difference there?
I heard parts of it coming through.
Right. And, the notion was work for free is not a good thing. Doing something for free is possible depending on the rationale or the reasoning behind doing it for free. I can see doing something for free for exposure. I've done it before in my past. Will Wheaton, in his article on his blog and the subsequent article in Salon, his position was, I shouldn't be doing anything for free. If you're, if a company thinks you're of value, don't give it away. There's some truth to that, but there's also some truth to doing some things for free, from nonprofits or things like that,
Yeah, that's exactly what I was going to say. I tend to do that kind of thing, but, the way I work is that if I decide to do it for free, I really don't want anything in return, and you do it for the right reason, and people are blessed and you kind of go on your way, but I love the comment that Tim put in the chat that said, exposure is great, but it doesn't feed the kids. I think that's a great rule to work from. And, when you're looking at some of the people that you come in contact with along your media journey, there's so many people that will tell you that they're going to be your lens to exposure. And you really dig deeper and find out that they're nowhere near in a position to be able to create real exposure. So I think that's one of the things that is wise, is to really kind of figure out who you're dealing with. And if they really do have a following, if they really do have a brand or some message that really can resonate with a community, so that if you're putting your work into it, it will actually be seen. Because 99% of the time, I feel like, especially some of the things you see again on things like Craigslist or some of these other sites, the people are literally just starting out. They have no budget. They have an idea. They want you to feed their vision with your time and your quality and your resources.
So that's a really good point. I want to jump off on that point because that's really good. We've been going for about 90 minutes, and I don't see any stopping point at the moment. But we're gonna ride this thing into the ground. So we'll see where it goes. But to your point about that. A lot of, and I'm hesitant to use the word kids, but I see this a lot in my industry because video game customers video game companies are some of my company's biggest customers. And I see a lot of ad hoc teams trying to form where it's no pay, but lots of fun, and we're going to make it. Right. And
everybody's going to be a success.
What?
Everybody is going to be a success.
Right. So we're going to be the next Minecraft, right? And I don't have a good argument there. You can hear me kind of stammering a little bit because when you're young and if you have a way to get the roof over your head and you've got the free time to do that, then by all means you should do that. But I've known people very close to me that have done that, and the people on the other end of the ask were they were taken care of. Right? They were just trying to leverage a business model on the dreams and aspirations of these young talented games artists, and make a living off that. And that is not appropriate, in my opinion. And we need to, as creative professionals, we need to educate against that kind of stuff. And
I think there's room when you're young and you need to learn as well. There's things that you need to develop. Those are great proving grounds and great places to get experience. There's nothing that should be taken away from that. But I'll give you a great story. I know somebody who moved to LA 10 years ago to be a filmmaker, and this was their thing. And they met a filmmaker and began working on a film. And basically it was literally full-time plus. And it was this idea that you're going to get paid on the back end, the very familiar mantra we hear. And I went to visit them in 2008, and I knew that at that time this guy was literally like close to living under a bridge with no money. And I went in his apartment and I saw a check for $1,200 laying on his computer. And I was like, why won't you cash the check? Well, who's this from? And he's like, oh, it's from the producer, but he says that there's international money that needs to be moved around and it'll take some time. And I'd heard that story once or twice from him before. So I basically got him in my car and I said, we're going to cash the check. Come to find out, there was $5 spread across 5 accounts. And this guy was basically just ripping everybody off. Doesn't happen like that all the time, but I think at some point you got to have your own personal boundary where you say, I'll give this much because I'm able to do it, or I can afford to lose it, or I'm going to learn in the process. But after that, you have to, I'm a big believer in the parable that a man is worthy of his hire, and a woman certainly as well. Those things are equal, but there's a lot of people that will pull that kind of stuff.
Right.
So you have to be aware.
Right. I just stole a quote from Brand Ideas. Hope you don't mind. I think that's an excellent point. And talking about internships, this comes from Brand Ideas, who's here in the room. Tim McVeigh. Hopefully I'm saying that correctly. Thanks for your contribution there, Tim. The internship isn't that far removed from free labor model for exchange for experience. Okay, so. I don't know if you had heard me earlier in the earlier in the podcast, Jeff. I talked about that. I did 3 internships when I was in college. The school I went to required 1. I did 3. That is how I knew I was going to get a job first when I got out. Somewhere along the line, someone had instilled to me that I needed experience beyond whatever piece of paper I got from the institution. So I did 3 internships. The things I liked about those internships, first, Red Cross. That was my first one, sophomore year. American Red Cross, great organization, volunteers. I knew what I was getting into, but it's brand name. And when you're a young, 19-year-old graduating college, or whatever, 18, 20, whatever, 21, American Red Cross is a brand name organization. So if you can do some work for a brand name organization, that's what I got out of it. 2, the second one was a paid internship with a top 500 advertising agency, which I know that's huge. I mean, there's 500. That's not a big deal, but they paid me, and it was a brand name, and it was a finite amount of time. It wasn't a lot of money, but at least they paid me, or a paid internship. I got a lot out of that. The third one was my obligatory. The school needed me to do it, but it was for a government agency. It was for a county information office. This is all pre-internet, so I was doing old school paste up and brochures and community communication. Community communications. But internships, I think, are absolutely critical to the defense of low wages for our graduates coming out of universities and schools and things like that. And I don't think obviously it's helpful if you are in school, you're going to do an internship. I don't think you need to do an intern. I don't think you need to be in school to do an internship. When I had my company, I offered internships. I've had a lifelong relationship with universities. I teach at universities. I've had my own company, this, that, and the other. Whenever I had an internship, I did not abuse the relationship because I did not pay. If I could pay, I would, but usually I couldn't. But if I couldn't pay, I had to make sure that the student got some kind of credit for it in school. And 2, it was only 6 weeks. There was a limit. I would not take an intern longer than usually. It's over summer. That's about all they can give. I want them to have a little bit of a life, on the front or back end before they head back to school. And plus, it gives them a little bit of time for them to, if they actually need to, work at a gas station or work, wherever, and get a little bit of beer money before they head back to school. That too. So, I'm totally okay with unpaid internships with very strict parameters and rules, preferably credit, certainly finite. And I'm interested in hearing from some other folks. Tim was the one who kind of kicked off that part of discussion, but internships as a defense for low rates. What are your thoughts on that, Jeff?
I think the internship model is a terrific model because it sets a framework around it that says, this is what's expected. This is what you're going to be able to receive for that. And it's going to be documented. Obviously there's oversight on it, and you can take it. And, again, like if you're going into TV, working in the newsroom as a young 20-something, as an intern, will give you experience that will be leaps and bounds more than if you didn't do that and you come in raw and not, you don't understand how the flow works and those things. Right. Those things are extremely valuable. But that's a situation where everybody knows kind of what's on the table and what's expected. Yeah. But that word intern, I've seen used so many times in so many different ways. In corporate America, I think even it's synonymous at times with let's find somebody who'll do the grunt work and we don't have to really give them a whole lot except buy pizza.
Right. John Terry was in here earlier and he's on another show. Big Block Studios does a show here on Blab, and they did a show, I think it was last week or this week. It was, you don't want an intern doing your social media. And the point of internships is not to get high quality free labor. The point of the internship is, let me back up for just a minute. Carl makes a point here. If you hire those free workers, you're doing yourself a disservice because you're slowing down your pipeline and there are only so many internships a good house can take before they are stressing out the trained people by having them teach and work. That's a valid point.
Yeah.
However, I believe that as professionals, it's our job to replace ourselves in our industries. And if we don't replace ourselves with effective young talent, that's a bigger disservice because then we're just opening it up to all of these chop shops and clip art companies and, offshoring to wherever for whatever dollar amount that it can be done. I agree with Carl in that we have to be careful about putting internships in mission critical positions. That is a bad idea. One, it sends the wrong message to your core employees, and two, it's just dangerous because those interns don't have judgment that you need, right? Any number of political campaigns have been tarnished by having interns do unwise social media, but internships are absolutely critical. And in animation firms like Disney and Sony and DreamWorks, I know that they have animation programs to bring talented artists in that give them meaningful work without endangering the end product being done. And I know architectural firms do that as well. I think I can't speak to every industry because I'm not in every industry, but I think internships are extremely valuable and probably the single biggest thing. And feel free to, anybody in the room want to jump in, we have an open seat, feel free to challenge me on this. And I'm not saying I'm right. This is an idea I'm riffing on because what Carl said and what Tim said and what Jeff has said here is that internships are arguably, I'll say that, are arguably the strongest offense that we have as professionals against low rates.
Yeah, I think it creates the most value for the person trying to get ahead, that may be new or young. The internship program gives you a path that is proven. And I think that's the difference between trying something and finding out that the people you're working for don't have any idea what that means and they're using it under a whole different circumstance.
Right. Exactly. If there's anybody that's in the room that would like to jump in, Rob or Tim, you guys have been having some good comments in there, or Carl.
Great.
Feel free to jump in. All right, Rob, we got Rob in here.
Rob would be great.
I'm still learning the Blab etiquette. I'm the kind of guy that'll just crash a party. Oh, there's an open seat. I'm joining. But I realize that it's probably good etiquette to invite people in. So, Rob, how are you doing tonight?
I'm good, although I'm hearing myself twice.
Uh-oh.
Can you guys hear me? Okay?
I can hear you fine. You might need to pop out and refresh your browser.
All
right, we'll save the seat for you.
No worries.
But so we'll give Rob a chance to come back in here.
Yeah, but going back to the whole thing, I think that it all starts with the heart. If you know your value even young, I think it protects you from being taken advantage of.
Right. And how do we instill that value in these kids? How do we, when we're critiquing them and we're bashing them for too much blue or not enough saturation or your typography sucks or whatever? How do we protect them?
I believe it's in how it's done and how it's said. I believe you can say anything to anyone, even if they disagree with it. And if you're respectful and you're building someone up, you're building into their life, you're pouring into them, you can make the case for why something may or may not be the way you like it, or because some of this stuff is subjective. But I think you can build into somebody where they know your heart as a leader and a mentor, that you're not trying to break them down. There's so much of that to begin with, and
right.
when people know you care about them, I think that they'll let you have a lot of latitude in that area.
Right. So, Rob, what do you think about all of this? Anything tonight that has really got you going?
Well, I had an affinity for both of kind of your histories, because we all are seem to be touching digital media in different ways. Chris, you said you were a software developer, and Jeff, I'm assuming you're in the TV production business.
Yeah, media TV.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my background,
I'm not smart enough to be a software developer. I'm a technical marketer. I'm a demo guy. I'm an evangelist.
Yeah. In my background's in video conferencing. So I've done 20 plus years in commercial and federal video conferencing. So,
cool.
Wow.
And you guys were talking about internships, and, I went to George Mason University. So I'm in your neck of the woods, Jeff. And,
I was going to say, yeah.
But, in going to George Mason, I did an internship with the Larry King Live Show, thinking at the time that I wanted to get into the TV industry. And, it was for sure, it was a phenomenal lesson learned, but the lesson learned was I didn't want to be in TV.
What did it for you?
Larry King was just a douchebag to work with. He was pretty bad maybe it got better, but he was pretty bad to us. So in any event, but I didn't come on to bash him. But there was certainly value there. And one thing I don't see, and maybe it's just in my small world, is I don't see a lot of interns. I mean, I don't get college students that approach, my company to do internships. But I remember in college, I mean, I sent out lots of, hey, I'll work for free. I'll do anything. I'll take out the trash. And, and when I worked at CNN, I mean, I was on the hook not only for working for free, but I had to take the metro, and there was real costs associated with doing the internship, sitting there and everything else. But, I've got no regrets. I mean, I've built a fantastic career, and, I'm really proud of what my business partner and I've kind of grown over the last 15, 20 years. And
that's awesome.
Yeah, it's like my Twitter says, I mean, I've got a very blessed life, and, but, these are very, very interesting times.
Yeah.
How long do we have to pay the dues, Rob?
I think kids nowadays are going to have to pay it a lot longer, because they're not being taught the right lessons. I mean, capitalism is taught early on to be bad, and it's not. And kids think that they're entitled to things. I mean, I'm a parent, and I'm guilty of entitling my kids to, they've all got their iPhones and iPads and all this other kind of crap.
Yeah.
So I'm not necessarily instilling the values of earning it in them yet. So in many ways, like all people, we all in our own ways live a hypocritical life. But I think capitalism, as I know it, in the context of a small business, genuinely works. I mean, I pay my guys very, very well. I love them to death. I mean, I've got a solid relationship with them. I treat them, and I hope, and I feel like they treat me like family.
Right.
But to your question about dues, I mean, it probably took me 15 years before I finally was starting to see the yield and fruit of doing the constant all-nighters, and
right.
But it pays off. It's good. I mean, the best parts of life are the hard times. It is the struggle.
Right. I don't mind, and this is a good. I don't want this to come out as a contradiction to things that we were talking about earlier. I do think it's important for interns and students to work hard and have those all-nighters and only be able to afford pizza for a little bit. Right. I mean, those are some character building moments, and I think they need to have some of those. But I do think that it's our job as professionals to help manage the expectations and keep an eye out on these people that we are bringing into our businesses to work with us and not completely abuse them. Hey, Tim, welcome to the show.
Hey,
Absolutely.
Hey, Jeffrey. Hey, Rob.
Hey, how you doing?
Hey, Tom.
Yeah, for Australia, internships is a relatively new concept. I know my son's at that university age, and he's fortunate enough to find paid employment in the field that he's wanting as a junior, as a step in the door kind of role. But I think that when you see internships, it's whether that relationship is abused. I really like your model, Chris, where it's for 6 weeks, we're going to train you, we're going to gift you with skills that you wouldn't have otherwise gotten. And I think that's actually a good model for it. And perhaps it's more formalized in America. I know often I hear, we'll just get an intern in and, as you said, give them the grunt work or make them work for free. And really, I think that becomes a kind of an abusive relationship and not a great model for any business to have with any employee. So I think that's where I see that sort of dichotomy of this working for free, getting free labor, and whether the exchange for labor and skills exchanged for labor is has value. And certainly, again, being a creative, I've done lots of work for free. Even the pitch model where we pitch the work for free against other agencies, and then the client gets the opportunity to pick and choose from that, is often an expensive model and adds to the expense for businesses that are. So yeah, I think that's something that you need to discuss with clients as well, is when they're asking you to pitch for business, and you will spend a lot of money developing concepts and developing a strategy and a plan for that, and then to sort of compete with that and then have that either be successful, great, you might recoup your investment, but there might be 3 other agencies who just lost that business, and therefore they have to recoup that money somewhere else, and that's often with their existing clients. So
it's funny you mentioned the pitch. Earlier in tonight's show, I referenced a website called NoSpec, NOSPEC.com. And there's actually the lead article on that is a client's argument against the free pitch. It's an interesting thing. It's the quoting from the site here from let me see if it credits the actual name. Tom Folks, marketing director of Peter Brent and Associates. He says, fundamentally, we believe that the creative pitch is commercially toxic and is a tradition the marketing profession can do without. Commercially toxic may sound a little over the top here, but here are some of the potential hidden consequences of the creative pitch that can have a negative impact on business post-decision, unquote. So, interesting that you bring that up because, it adds to the cost for the contract because you have to accommodate that. And then if you're pitching against 3 or 4 other studios or agencies and you don't get that, you've invested all of that time to not get it.
And that affects your cost structure. Somewhere along the line, you still have to make a profit. And if you spent money, time and effort, that ends up being put on your existing clients. And they're, whatever agency, I guess, has to kind of balance that relationship out. So I often will not compete in those kind of free pitch situations because I don't think it's fair, particularly on my clients that I have, rather than to win that one new piece of business. Now, sometimes obviously that new piece of business has value and you'll do it, but often I think it's better if you can have clients who can make a decision and therefore have vetted you and looked at your work and worked out whether you're actually going to bring value to them first before they sort of ask for you to jump through a lot of hoops in order to woo them. And I think, I think we're getting better at that business relationship of not creating those additional costs through the system.
Great. Well, go ahead, Rob. Go ahead.
referring to Tim's son and doing the internship and what his comment was in terms of it not being fully structured in Australia like it is here. I sense, Chris, that one of the things that you've done very mindfully, or I don't know if you formally did this or not, but it sounds like you empathize with the situation of internships. But the good thing you did is while there wasn't necessarily an exchange of money, you laid down rules so that everything was crystal clear. It's going to be 6 weeks. These are the things you're going to do. You basically, well, you did exchange value because you presented it up front.
You sold the value back to the
because I think most people feel slighted if they're working for free. I mean, nobody really works for free. Everybody works for their own self-interest. And while they may do it for no money, they do it because they're in their minds, whether it's true or not, believe that you'll do something, you'll refer the money, you'll refer the business, whatever. And because it's not clear and not fully presented up front before the exchange of value happens, that's when disappointment happens, right?
Right.
So to your credit, Chris, in terms of the internships and laying it out, I mean, that's fair, right? Because you're telling the students, look, this is what you can expect. You're not going to make any money. But these are the things I'm going to teach you. These are you're going to be taking out the trash. That's just
and that is a good point. I think, I don't know if it was Jeff or Tim or someone was saying that is, I don't mind giving them grunt work, but I'm not going to make them a slave for 6 weeks.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. You're going to take out the trash, and in my industry, taking out the trash is like, we call it render wrangling, where you have animators that are rendering out all these frames, and there's just one guy sitting there watching the server at 3 a.m. saying, okay, that rendered.
Watching the blue bar go.
Okay, that rendered. But so you're going to do that, but then maybe we'll let you do some design work. Maybe, you know what? I need you to model this 3D asset for me real quick. Let me see what you got. Mm-hmm. And as hopefully I'm smart enough to know that if this kid's gonna fall on his face, that's fine. Let him fall on his face. I'm not going to give him the hero shot. I'm not going to give him, he's not going to model Nemo. He's probably going to model, the seaweed.
Right.
And you know what I mean? Give him a skill appropriate opportunity, but nonetheless give him an opportunity, and vary the experience. Take out the trash, watch the render farm, model the widget. Change out all the video cards in the rigging, for the riggers. Get your hands dirty, because one day either you're going to be working for someone else or you're going to be the boss and you're going to be changing the graphics cards at 3 a.m. because I've done that. Right. So
that helps them. What you're doing there is you're helping that person fall forward. I mean, you're not giving them like you said, the hero project. But you're giving them something that they can take and either do something really cool for themselves with, and if it doesn't work, then at least they tried. But I think that's where when I talk about building people up, that's what you do is present somebody with a new opportunity when you can, when you can risk it.
Yeah. And a piece of advice that I had received as a professional, not as a student, but I think is really important is fail early and fail often. Fail. There's as much learning from failure as there is from success. Frankly, there's probably more learning from failure.
I've already wrote that book a couple times, I think.
We jokingly say I got that T-shirt, but fail early and fail often. And I think the other thing is, we're not teaching these kids. What Tim?
Oh, Lucy just said, and fail forward.
Oh yeah, fail forward. Sure, right. But fail. Mistakes are a good thing. I ran across a company, and I want to wrap this one up because we've been going almost 2 hours, but I want to finish on this note. Is like I've heard of companies that are of angel investors only working with companies that have failed at least twice. Because if it's the same guys and they failed at least twice, they've probably learned something important along the way about success and how to get, and they're still at it. So, but I want to thank everybody. This has been an absolutely amazing conversation tonight. When I scheduled the show, I didn't really know what I was going to get into. I had some outlines. I had some things that I wanted to talk about, and everybody has really stepped up. Everybody that's joined in the room, I'm really grateful for all of your contributions tonight, Tim and Jeff and Rob and Lucy was around, and John Terry from Orlando was here, and had a couple of other people pop in. And I know we probably didn't get to everybody, but I'm really grateful for everybody taking the time to stop by and join me on the Creative Tech Show. I'll be doing this. I was thinking every Tuesday and Thursday, but it might be only every Thursday. But subscribe to me and you'll get notified when I do my shows. So thank you, everybody. I appreciate your time. I'm Chris Murray, your Creative Tech Guy, and this has been the Creative Tech Show, episode number 3. Have a good night, everyone.
Good talking to you guys. Cheers.
Thanks. Cheers.